Hey, are we ready for me? Are we all present and accounted for? Loosh. I should folder that. Okay. I'm learning. I'm learning. Okay. I have too many windows. How are we doing? How are the people today? What up? I have a fun different thing today for us to do. I had to have a snack first though, so I wouldn't die on stream. So don't forget your water. There's the otter. So so I thought we would maybe actually show the stupid Godot project I've been poking at for 2 or 3 years now. There, I moved my mic. This might actually entail some typing on my pretty jank ass keyboard at the moment. It has decided as of last night that I technically need two space bars, I guess, because it is more or less split, not quite in half, more like 3/4 and a quarter. But you know what I mean. A weird little worn out spot where, judging by how the wear and tear on the, I guess you'd call it ink on the space bar, it's right where my thumb goes when I'm typing. So I guess my wife is right, and I just type way too hard. And after a couple years of due service, my space bar has had enough of me. I don't know how much new keycaps are. The keyboard works fine otherwise. Like, even the spacebar still technically works. It's just, it's kind of fucked up. I could pop it out and like epoxy it or something maybe too. I don't know. I'll figure out something. But for now, if I am cursing out my spacebar, you know why. Now this does have a bit of a different situation than normal for how we're gonna do it, because we're going full desktop. Hi. You can see all my filthy secrets on screen one, which I've tried to clean up pretty well. You can even see the cave. There it is. That's the Otter Cave, which is also a Godot project. It's just a very, very simple one. It's some constructive geometry, ooh, by which I mean 3 cubes and a hollow circle, and 2 lights that project the water thing on its noise on the wall and spin, so it's basically doing the same thing as one of those night lights you get that projects water on the wall. Kinda. Yeah. At least if you get a half decent one. And then there's like a single plane down there that kind of looks like water, but it's not even animated or anything. It's just there. Hi, Solar. This is the Otter Cave, and this is Slime Forest in all of its extremely still in alpha glory, but it does work. Now, I think I need to turn on desktop audio. The forest is slimed, but right now it's more of a blue void, but that's fine. It's also a noise texture. We got a noise texture, and we have oh, there it goes. We have the wet void. Yes, the wet void. I've shown screenshots of this in the little private parts of the server. That sounds inappropriate, but you know what I mean. My wiggly water. Yes, I should look at that. There we go. That'll be fine. Lewd, my wiggly water. And if the frame rate dips, it's because I clicked like my Twitch chat or something. The Godot decides to just basically really cap the frame rate when you look at a different window for efficiency's sake. And from the top, the water's kind of weird looking, and I can explain why even, but it is. Can I turn off the environment? Can I just like say, where is that button? There is a button for this. I always forget what display unshaded. Oof. Display wireframe. That's fun. That's fun. Look at that. Wee. Okay. Not what I wanted, but I'll take it. Um, oh my god. Half resolution. I just wanted to turn off. There it is. There we go. Now you can see the water in full. Straight up just the noise text, like not even a texture. It's like mathematical noise. I did no control over it. It's all in here. You can see this funny little thing down here that's like my material preview. I mean, it's going on an adventure. I apparently, oh, there it is. I can't make it bigger. I can't. I can't. Yes. Yes, it's not seamless. That makes me sad, but it is fun to look at. I didn't feel like actually doing code stuff, so I dabbled with the nightmare that is the visual shader. This is supposedly easier for artsy farts like me, and I don't believe it. But I did get somewhere. You make the time, and you scale it, and you pass it through the noise for an offset, so it's constantly to that, and every 10 minutes it might jump and reset if it's not seamless enough. I don't know. That's not up to me. That's an engine thing. I can change the timer. That's about it. I can change how intense the waves are. I can change the color, how it mixes a little bit. But yeah. Basically, it's glorified Photoshop layers down here and then what they're actually doing up here. And what they're doing it to, which is the vertex. So every little dot on the water is affected by this math, and it determines its color and its height, and that is how that works. I've never shown it moving before, so I'm still proud of it. And then we have the environment. So I have been working. I've been showing screenshots of this lot, but again, not much video since. There it goes. Wow, it's pissy today. See how it goes. I spawned in the middle of butt nowhere right now, but there we go. Well, we're in the dungeon, right? I've been working on the dungeon, and the tile set. This you're technically right in the middle. I just don't have it. And there's some slight flaws, like you can see where this bridge is supposed to be, just a nice big hole. Enjoy my hand. Do we like my hand? And that should be, oh, because the water's next to that one. I know why it's not doing that. We got our logs. But it's less whoops and more just, I didn't check for bridge tiles. And I'm probably going to change those. I think I'm making them like rocks that you walk across. I think that look more natural with the whole forest vibe. And there's always the chance that the way the trees look will change on the line too. The hand is always doing the job, and you can take that to the bank. But yeah, you can see all the little visual things I've been working on. My trees. You can see the dirt. This would be really easy to fix. We might actually do that later, just to say we did. The resolution of the dirt, because this is the old flat. So I have it optimized a bit. You can see this one doesn't have the thing. So anyone that looks like this just doesn't have the edge, and that's so it's not drawing a bunch of extra faces under the world, basically, or processing them rather, because I think it culls that, but you know, it's extra shit for your computer to do. This is my dungeon. This is what I've been working on. There's no collision yet. I need to set your start point before I have you bump into stuff, or we'll never escape. I want to say the fake walls are here. I saw one. Where'd it go? I saw one fake wall. I swear I did. Mommy, there it is. Okay. Oh, yeah, that's here. There's the fake wall. Real wall, fake wall. I was going to show the difference this way, but that's oh, I'm sorry. Solar does not feel well. Feel that. Yeah, it hides, but if you're at eye, this was the idea. If you're at eye height. Oh, and the sound is working. I'm just extremely quiet, apparently. It's one of the few things that has collision right now is what that object is and how it works. So, yeah, it is a perception check, and that's kind of the idea. But like even from here, you're like you can see the gap, right? So that's what I was looking for, and I'm hoping to make it so you can jump over the logs. So it's a two space move. One of the few things that cast shadows, the logs. Yeah, it's basic, but it's a lot of little art pieces and stuff done up together and thrown together and all that. So that's the thing I've mostly been working on. And I can show off the story scene I need to finish writing. I keep forgetting they're actually coming in. Well, no, I'm not forgetting. I need to finish art. And I can show off some of that too, actually. I have... Let's just bring up Base Sprite. Let's just do it. Let's just have all of our toys up and we'll go for a fun little tour. One of these things is not like the other. I am looking for Gularia. There she is. That's going to be for the cutscene. But for now, the cutscene does in fact start. Right. How exciting. How exciting. We're in the void. It keeps... Oh, that's a little loud. So the first thing game will do when you launch it first time, it'll ask you to set up your profile, set your name, and all that. So it will know your name. Sorry, it knows who you are. Be afraid. And I'm debating having the options screen come up right away, because it will, after you make your profile, kick you right in here by default. So maybe give people the opportunity to at least set their screen resolution and shit first. You know what I mean? We'll see. Solar is scared. Yes, we can all hear you. With your... I can even show you how I make the sounds too. I want to make a sound for something later, so there's a few things I would like to actually do, but
Alright, do.
I'm leaning back. Yay, more mic noise. There we go. That's pretty good. Well, yeah, I'm going for that old school. You can confirm talking in the void is off-putting because Twitter exists. All right. Beep. Yeah, I was going for that old school like Super Nintendo, like when text appears goes, but I did some pitch variants and stuff, trying to make it sound a little bit like I guess a voice. I don't know. It's a very it's a chip basic chip. I can't talk. Basic chip synth sort of sound. It's just somewhere between like old NES like text appear scroll and Animal Crossing. Excuse me. You guys introduced yourself. There you go, Spritz. The first goo pun. It's her name. I hope that makes you happy. Local slime boy gets his dues. There will be more of them as it goes. Just not so much in this one. Yeah, my puzzle game has a plot. Because I'm me, and I can't help it. Also, do we like my weird little goo peripheral thing? I love my little goo peripheral thing. Can't wait for people to spot, like, 27 typos I've never noticed, because I'm doing this without spell check. And there you go. And there's your call to action. I need to play around with my buttons. I think I can have two side by side, but I don't think I've tested that yet. So I'm tempted to have two different options. Not necessarily have them matter, but let you feel like you have input. That's the end of that so far. Because I have to actually do all the art and stuff for it. Which, again, includes her. So she's going to be there just kind of like making faces and stuff. Because that's fun. That's just fun, right? You don't need star notice anymore, I don't think. And then everything else in the game can more or less be accessed normally right now by just running it. So, our profiles, he's in jail. Dorbo's not real. Pick who you want to be. This all works. You want to make a new one, you can blah, 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 blah. You can random. There you go. And if you... Oh. Apparently that has a tooltip on it. More of these say enter than I'd like. Well, that's something to look into later. And these will allow you to, for example, skip the intro and tutorials and stuff when you've done them all already, when you make a new file. Skip the need to get level 20. You know, stuff for when you're, starting a new file for like a challenge run or something. I want to have slightly unforgivable implement. Well, that's fun. Very intrusive kitten. Tiny rainbow. I love this thing. I haven't played with this in a while. I could do this for 6 hours right here. Barely chicken. Alright, we're just going to leave it at barely chicken. But I'm going to stick his meme for now. And for now, the only things that really work, I have all my little plans here. We have frenzy, we have endurance, and endurance is the default. We have our settings. They're very basic right now, but I can, you know. And this actually should stop at 7. Yep. It checks the resolution of the main monitor that you're using and finds the biggest thing that is not full screen. So 8x would probably be full screen, and makes that your highest window scale. Then you can just do that if you want. And then palettes don't have any more yet. I'm probably gonna end up moving this actually. So the plan at this point is down the line. I want to redo. This is obviously not a final title screen. It has some nice little touches. It welcomes you back, all that, your default stuff. But most of the buttons don't work, and I don't have a logo yet. And I want to separate the main game modes into like their own little menu thing. And in that menu thing, let you pick your palette among some other things that people expect, like, you know, Tetris in the 80s, let you pick your fucking song. I might make you unlock that like a cruel bitch, but, you know, set your palette and stuff for that. Got our volumes. Yes, 100%. This is a sprite gradient, vertically mirrored with dot matrix, and then I ran blur on it. So it's just kind of weird looking, but it works. Big N64 vibes, yeah. But this just kind of starts for now. And this is our main game, right? Basics are what they are. Stars are here now because I'm actively working on those. I'm probably going to change how they're scored. And I don't think they're submitted to leaderboards yet, but we do have my high score here. I believe this is my personal record, and I want to make it so you can change that too. Probably on that mode set. If you want to see the local record, personal record, or even like the global record in your highest score. Because some people are going to want different shit. You know? And I don't think this actually affects anything on the submission. It just affects, you know, the UI. Which recently had a huge overhaul. Oh boy, I moved everything in this center to its own little object now. Which is technical and dumb, but it's there. Endurance is pretty straightforward, and I am going to have, like, probably just a pop-up tutorial, honestly, because it's not that complicated. We got our 3 slime girls over here. You can't tell yet, and I'm in the way of one of them. Maybe I can... I might have to shrink that window, huh? Good thing I can do this. Hey, look at that. What a cool button. All right. We're going to put that where my big head's not in the way. That'll do. That's fine. You can at least see some of it. So, I'll scoot down a little bit for my sake. For some reason, I'm just like looking up. It makes me mad. I'm mad. Okay. This little orange line down here, that's how much it costs to do a turn. This little orange line is just that doubled, so you can see 2 turns ahead if you have enough energy. There's some sound editing to do there, and this is your overflow bar, and you'll see how that works in a minute. But it's eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Let's start with this. And everything has a stutter when it starts the day. My pooter needs something. It's angy. Alright, whatever. There we go! Woo! Matches. Very simple. A million games that kind of do the same thing, honestly. The main draw is this over here, and this over here. But as we go, you can see the star implementation. So far, there's nothing, right? We'll try to change that here. That one takes a little more intentional effort. Oh, there we go. I finished Slime Girl. I got a star. 1 star. Does that turn you on? Ooh la la. So we're going to make a big dumb batch of greens, because that sounds good to me. So far, it's not working great, but we're going to do it. There we go. Okay. Big dumb batch of greens. We're going to go down here, and womp. There we go. I made a rainbow slime. And I finished the Slime Girl, and I finished the set, so this is +4 now. Because as it's scoring right now, it's like exponential. 1, 2, 4, 8, 16. I am probably going to change that to how the slime scoring works. But I haven't really talked about that either. So a lot of people find this one kind of unintuitive. The number of slimes you get versus the points you get is, I thought pretty straightforward. I didn't want it just to be exponential. And I'm realizing why, again, with the stars, because when I first put in the stars, I tested by making a bunch of these rainbow slimes. You get a star every time you pop a rainbow slime. Rainbow slimes can pop other rainbow slimes. And other than clicking one, that's the only way to do it. Rainbow slimes are made when you match 40 of the same thing or whatever. 40 in general. 40 in one turn, rainbow slime. 80, 2 rainbow slime. 120, you're a god, you get 3. I think this is big enough to do 120. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Yeah, it's like 12 by 12. So yes, you absolutely can do 120. But since it doubles every one, I got like 4,096 stars in one move, and that kind of, it's rewarding, but it dwarfs the rest of the game combined, because in an entire normal run, I got about 200 stars. So I don't want it to make everything else you did feel pointless. Currency? Maybe. Well, yeah, but you don't get stars unlocked until level 20 by default. So you have to earn the ability to even earn stars. I did have an idea for currency, but we can come back to that. So for slimes, 1 slime 1 point, 2 slime 3 point, because it's 1 plus 2. 3 slime 6 points, because it's 1 and then 2 and then 3 and then 4, 10, because 1, 2, 3, 4. I think that works a bit better. And there we go. Every time this is full, if you get more points, it goes in here. And if this gets full, you get a multiplier. Filling Slime Girl sets, this feels a little easier. It's like a 10% bonus for each set you make, but each set gets harder to make. And that helps you stay alive longer as you go. It's fairly straightforward. And the idea of stars is, since you have to hit level 20 to unlock them, and you'll know I'm still on 1, it takes a while. I think this turn will make me level, so if I do this... Yeah, that got me quite a few. There you go. And that was the idea of stars, is you find opportunities, you learn how the game works, and you react to it, and you try to maximize this. And it makes you make different decisions. So I'll probably have it toggleable once you unlock it. You can turn it off, because it does kind of bait you into doing things that aren't necessarily good for your survival sometimes. There's the frame that looks more like a penis than I'd like. So that's something we need to fix in the future. And bets are up on whether or not this will get me, kicked from Twitch, but I don't think it will. I don't think I'm doing anything Shantae's not doing, and that's fine, so. They don't like exposed buttocks. That's what I learned looking into it. Don't show any booty butt on Twitch. They'll get mad. Specifically booty butt. Doesn't matter if it's like Barbie doll booty butt. No booty butt for you. Daddy Twitch no like. Bezos scared of the booty. Very interesting line, I suppose. The Cartoon Network can show a booty butt to your children, but Twitch cannot. Twitch cannot. Illegal. Bad. Okay. Sure, man. They hate big butts, and they cannot lie. All the hover mothers can't deny. I really wanted to, like, go for the big yummy here. Incorrect. I see. Let's do this. Boom. Oh, I heard that. I heard the one glitch. I don't know what causes that. It's been happening for ages. Once in a blue moon, one slime will escape everything else and just pop on its own. It's part of the chain. It just doesn't line up right, and I don't know why. I've never figured out why. It's extremely just once in a blue moon it happens. It doesn't break anything. It's just there. B. And you'll note, as I've leveled up, this has gotten bigger. And eventually, this will hit a point where it is at least, like, up to a quarter of my meter. And after it hits a quarter of your meter, it still gets bigger. It just secretly cannot be more than a quarter of your meter. So what it does is it just makes the whole meter bigger. It's not visually bigger, but it is more like it's 100 energy right now. So 100 slimes worth by default. And it just goes up to whatever it takes to make this be at least 4 moves. So you always have at least 4 moves to try and keep yourself alive. But keeping yourself alive will get harder as you go. I have seen a push to call games like this arcade puzzlers, and I did not realize we weren't doing that already. Like, that's what I've been calling them for a long time. So I don't know if that makes me special or weird. Big ol' rainbow, big ol' this and that. So there are like 4 tiers of the little score pop-ups. I just pissed off everything. No, my tablet went icky. I hate when it does that. Why is my desktop all iffy now? What is going on with my computer? Oh, there it goes. Okay, I gotta move some stuff. I broke everything. I broke everything. I did it. I broke everything. I'm good at it. Are you proud of me, Mom? I broke everything. Hi, I'm huge. Wait. What? Did the scale not change until I Interesting. Okay. Oh, I still have Task Manager up. What's it telling me? Not much of use. Okay. My computer's just cranky. For some reason. Let's blame Windows. It's usually Windows. It's usually Windows. It's your life lesson for the day, kids. It's Windows, right? That one corner. Where you live. And this goes up every time. It accounts for this multiplier and how many sets you've made. I want to mark where those are, like maybe a little line on the bottom. I don't know. I've been considering that. I know how to do that. I don't know why. Eee! Straightforward. Fun, though. Engaging. We'll play for a long time if no one stops me. Kind of a thing. There's 3 colors. I kind of want to make that a star. If you get all 3 colors in one thing. Even with a rainbow, that's I thought about doing a 2-color one, but I think 3 is more interesting. Make what a better holding area. Oh, you want me to like show every girl you've made? No. I was thinking just little heads on the bottom. I was just thinking like, well, like little markers. What? No, no, no. Let's see here. We're good. Oh, yeah, no, I've thought about that. The first step of that whole process is even making the background instead of just having a generic noise. The second step is there's not a lot of background truly visible. So decorating it with a bunch of little slime heads poking out was my idea, but when you look at it, it's just like there's not a ton of room for that without it becoming visual clutter. Especially because you will probably make like 10 plus sets of these in a good game. So... Oh no, it's the whole screen's going to be the background. The corner has the stars that pop up. It has all this other info like this. These can technically scroll forever. And this needs to be clear. This is actually really important to like your priorities. Like if I pop green right now, it does nothing. If I pop blue, it gets red is very close. We can probably just finish red real quick. You make a lot of decisions based on what these three look like. So you need that to be pretty clear, or you're going to create a very frustrating situation very fast. And that is like the limitation. I'm just saying there's not a lot of room for anything in spreads. It's a very crowded little space. I don't have a lot of wasted space in my UI right now. I designed it that way more or less on purpose. It can be done. It's a question of whether or not it should be done. Because it gets very visually cluttered. And then there's also the actual programming side of it, because these are all just grayscale. I am so tired of bots trying to sell me viewers. I'm gonna eat a man. Delicious flesh. I did. It's gone. I killed it. There's the implementation of even testing it would be pretty annoying because I have the way the slimes are rendered. There's a lot to consider, and it's not a lot of room. I'd have to do some mock-ups, and these are size changing, and I got to do the actual background. I have thought about this specific thing. So I am pretty confident I'm not going to go there, but I have thought about it. It's low priority right now. The background has been... Art stuff, you'll note all three are the same girl, and I have started a second girl. I do have a second slime girl. She's just... That's not her. I mean, that is her, but that's not the one we want. Hello? There we go. Wing. There she is. Her shading needs work, but she's here. We got our jiggle. They're slimes. They jiggle. They're kind of the most art-intensive part. Like, I've made everything involved in that dungeon model and everything faster than I've made one of them. They just take a long time. They're quite detailed, which is only frustrating because I would like to give you options on, like, what they look like. The game was built for that from the start. Like, straight up from the start. I can go in here, I can go to the slime girl, or no, it's in the main. Somewhere, yeah. I set up what the sprites are. Rainbow sprites, materials. I do not set up the slime girl sprites. I should probably do that, but for now, they're just there. Well, they'd be pretty easy to set, so. Actually, they don't even have their sprites set, do they? Wow. Slime girl blue, slime girl... Is it not? Oh, they're instanced. Oh, shit. I have to look at that. I haven't touched that since I first made the... Like, that's one of the first things I did, was make those girls. So, kind of core to the idea. At least what made the idea interesting. Because again, there's a lot of games that kind of do the same thing. Like, Collapse has been around forever. The trick is doing it in a way that no one else has done it, and I don't think anyone's done the energy meters thing. Never mind the cute little animated hand. Pew! You like my cute little animated hand that goes pew? I introduced input lag just to have the animated hand, thank you. Was it worth it? Was it worth it, everybody? 1 frame of input lag on your mouse? I don't even notice it. Apparently, like, Yuri played it on Linux, and she's like, no, it's got, like, drag or something. I'm like, what? No idea. I haven't set up Linux or anything to test that, but that is... It was enough she noticed it, and I really don't notice mine, so... I don't know! This gets big. It's never, like, game-changing, but it's a nice little bit of bonus. It helps. This is our main little game mode. This is the one you'll probably spend the most time in, unless you have a very specific inclination as a human being. And some people do. Some people will be my savants of Frenzy mode. Lord knows I don't even have the local record in Frenzy mode. I was utterly destroyed in my own game. Do with that information what you will. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Boom. Boom. Oh no, it's got to brown. E. Level 10, halfway to 20. You notice it's already getting pretty big, right? So these leveling, again, it's only 10% bonus every time, so 1.1 energy per slime, 1.2. But it adds up really fast because you're matching like a bunch of these at once usually. So that, you know, you do want to prioritize the slime girls as best you can. Getting an early multiplier is a thing people can do for score, but it also, you know, it's all very, you make your choices. Also, to make sure this is accurate, I genuinely don't know. I should really put something in the debugger to tell me if I have messed that up. It'd probably be smart. Ooh. Ooh. We're getting an opportunity for something very tasty here. And I do like having tasty opportunities. It's fun for the whole family. Oh, the star doesn't really have an animation. It's just the things popping up. They're there for 2 whole seconds. The set bonus, I mean, I could make it skippable, I guess. It's just, it's part of the game feel. It feels good. Or you mean the time where it spawns the rainbow? No. Yeah, it's game feel. It's game feel. I mean, maybe, but it's game feel. I'm hesitant. Oh, I'm in the naughty zone. There we go. I'm in trouble now. I need to fix that sound. It's too short and doesn't really seize attention well enough. Yep, I have alerts. So now we're in the danger. If I do not get enough energy, we die. And I fucked this up, so Happy Fun Time's not going to go the way I wanted it to, and I'm really upset about that. Well, fine. It's fine. I don't need Happy Fun Time. We can do this, though. 2 rainbows. Rainbow slime made. There we go. So I get X3! Woo! More points. And more stars. And now we're back in this stage of like, okay, we get about 4 turns worth of energy max, and we are trying to build up what we can. And getting the girls also makes it easier to get overflow, obviously, because it's easier to fill this. And priorities. You choose your priorities. That's the idea. There's lots of room for different like player options and stuff, honestly. It's just, it's going to be a matter of prioritizing what's important first, kind of a thing. Bleed. Okay, we're in trouble. Let's do it. There we go. I'm alive. This is a pretty good setup. What can I do with that? I don't know. I have to think. I could probably do this. It's not a terrible start. Okay. One more move to see if anything comes together. That's fine. Bam. And you know what? I'm already really dancing with danger, and I got level 12. So 20 is not easy in the main mode, at the very least. There's arguments to be made. It's much easier in Frenzy. And I have to set up the others now. Now that I actually have a UI thing that won't make me pull my hair out when trying to set all that up. Girl complete. Girl complete. Bibbity bibbity. And screw it. Someday I'll get that fourth one again. Feels real good when you get that fourth one. It's very rare. It's like a, I think that's the 100 plus slime chain gets you the fourth one. You won't hear it often. Unless you're really, 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 really good, in which case, grr. Stop being better than me, the thing I made. Ooh, choices. I'm not sure if that was the right one. Well, got all this lined up. See what happens. 63. Maybe it's 80. I don't remember. It's a fair amount. 14. And part of me says I should make this level 15 for the thing. I don't know. Because I have been able to hit 20 more than once. There are ways to do it. It's just, you have to kind of change your mindset a bit when you're going for it. And my head is not in that space presently. I thought about giving a star if you're in the red like this and you get over this line, so you're out of any alert. A very specific one, like get risky and then go. Or like get in the red and then make a turn gives you a star, so the longer you can survive down here, the more you get, because that's a bit of a mastery test in its own, right? That might work. Basically, I want the star system to be the equivalent of going after Grandmaster, but it doesn't have that set cap. It is the thing that is for people that have spent a lot of time in the game and are trying to demonstrate their unholy mastery. So, if you can do it, you know, I want to reward you being a bit of a little freak. And that's also why I think changing this to a linear roundup here instead of this exponential one would be better, because then it's every way you earn stars matters, not just the big cash-ins. The big cash-in is nice, but if you have consistent, consistent addition, blah, 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 blah. How do I life? Then you will have better stars in the long run. It'll give you more often. This is a nice little RNGesus setup. And there's a gamble to making these big things too, and I don't think many people have thought about this that have played it. You give up board control. So you have this whole setup of greens, right? These will all be, once they're matched, replaced with something randomly. So having a cluster on the side that like these blues, that helps me. That helps me because there's always a chance that you're going to get a fresh board shuffle and you only have 4 moves to make something that'll keep you alive, and what you get is ass. And part of me's thought like, man, maybe I need a bag system or something to prevent that. I can't really think of one for this, But also, there are methods you can do within the game itself to keep your ass in the game. Look at this. This is kind of risky, right? But bam. That worked out pretty well. And you'll know this is getting much harder. And this is getting much harder. I hear a cat. Oh, the cat is asking mother for love. Okay. And now I'm more consistently down here in the yellow and whatnot. Like, oh shit, we're in danger. We got to pay attention. After 15, I'm considering having like song change at 10 or something. I don't know. Are we sick of hearing this one yet? I don't know. I don't know if you even can really. I don't know what the volume's like. Yeah, it's in the... You should probably be able to hear something. I can make it a bit louder if you want. But... We have a lot of reds. We're going to pop the reds. And that's perfect. I wanted that. Now, if I use the rainbow, I can get blue and green. Or if I just use the blue, I can get the two rainbows lined up and pop both of them at once. That appeals to me. We have all these reds over here doing stuff, so that should be alright to just wham. Set bonus made. That's number 12. So at number 12, we're getting 220% energy from everything, which makes this much easier since this bar is... I mean, we can see what the bar is up to. I have that capacity. I think it's on remote. We come in here. I know. Really digging in here. The HUD energy meter. What's it say? 148. So its default is, I believe, 100. 80. Its default's 80. So it's almost double its normal size, but we're also getting double the normal energy. So that's where these really start to matter. Because again, around level 10, this starts not really being noticeable in terms of its growth. Level 12, somewhere like that. So you will notice it getting a lot harder to fill, though. And you'll be like, Sarah, how are you going to actually tell the player that? And we'll get to that when I untimely die here in a second. We're taking it. Hey, look at that. Boom. And this, I like the warnings in the light that really helps you. Like, again, I'm trying to make decisions here. Do I push my luck or what? I can look at this. Well, yeah, because it is a mixture of strategy and luck. It's resource management, and one of your resources is your board. You know. Well, god damn. All right. Yeah. Oh, double penis. I gotta fix that sprite, dudes. Okay, let me tell you what I was going for. I'll tell you what I was going for, right? You see how she forms, and I'm gonna move the mic again. Sorry. She forms, right? You got the legs, you got the head. This is the start of her forming. There's the head, and there's where the legs are starting to form. That's what I was going for. And it took exactly one person that wasn't me looking at it to go, instantly, that looks like a penis. And I was like, come on. I thought I'd get away with it for more than half a second. It's not on purpose. It's not supposed to be a penis. It's supposed to be her head. And the thing is, like, well, how do I fix it? I could exaggerate the head and the legs. Well, no, that just looks more like a cock and balls then, doesn't it? At least this way, it's like, it kind of looks like a penis. If I make this, the thing on top more swollen and give this more definition, now it just is a dick and balls. And I don't know how to fix that without losing the transition of the animation. So I'm a little bit like, oh, I could soften this, but it's still going to have the shading shape. I think I just made my bed on this one. I think I just have a dick frame. Please don't ban me. I don't know. I'm doing my best over here. Oh, I'm so close too. Oh, fuck. I think I'm dead, dudes. Yes, but these have a head too. It's this form versus bigger, and like I could do that. The whole idea I am not redrawing all of these sprites, Brits. I'll kill you. Oh, hey, since I have it selected in the remote thing, it's got a little outline around it showing me what it is. That's kind of interesting. If I go back to root, does that go away? It does. Huh. I need to figure out how to save my ass. If I get rid of those greens, I think I'll still live because I'm pretty close to the line. And I have the reds. That won't shift the blues enough. You see what I mean, though? 20 is meant to be a hard goal, and I'm close to it, and I'm just kind of dicking around. But even I don't consistently reach it on endurance, so we're dead. No, I have like one energy. What is my energy right now? What? Max value 156. Present value, I'm equal to 0. I didn't know I could be equal to 0. Holy shit. I think it has to be less than 0. I still don't think anything here will save me. I think blue is the biggest. Oh, there's a line. There's one line. Yeah, we're done. We're so done. None of this is touching. The best I can do is this group, I think. That's 6. Now this is 7. There we go. Hit over. That was once again my new record, so I'm doing well on score. I'm just not winning at, the 20. So I will note, LM played this. He's not on the board for endurance. And then global, there he is, way down there. Dorbo is my tester, my profile tester. And then this doesn't work at all, so this will just go forever. But this isn't here yet. I have not implemented stars. This isn't sent to leaderboards. Fine. That is the main mode. That's the main attraction. Everything else is built on that. And the only other one I have set up right now, and I haven't tested with the new stuff with the stars, so we'll see if this explodes together, is Frenzy. Now, the good news is there is a different song. The bad news is you can easily give yourself carpal. Why is there 54 in debugger? Oh. You're mad about the audio manager. Yeah, I should readdress that at some point. That's fair. That is fair. But this is Frenzy. This drains constantly, good luck. But the move cost is really low. And your level goes up based on time. Which, right off the bat, means stars is going to be really weird. Though I kind of like the way stars could be weird. Because your star, you're going to gain a... Okay, so your stars tally at the end of your turn. When you're able to immediately... Like, when the hand goes back, that means you're able to do a turn. So, if you dilly-dally and just let it add up, you can get more stars by just not taking a turn. But this is always draining. And that's kind of an interesting thing to me. Is that worth it? Is anyone going to exploit that? I don't fucking think so. But they have the option if they feel inclined, I suppose. And I don't even feel bad about that. Yeah, I know. Now, to give you some perspective, I think LM had, like, 6 sets complete before the end of level 1. That man can click. You will see at the end of this his high score versus mine, and it is embarrassing. So that's the one he's good at. Or was good at before he got carted off. But we'll see what the judge says about that. And again, you can do really foolish, stupid things. You can do this. You can just do this. It's a mode where you can do this. It's arguably the mode where... No! I misclicked. This one's more frantic. This one will not be for everybody. But I do think the people that like it will really like it. And that's kind of what I'm going for with some of the other modes. Endurance is the main one, but I do think different players will enjoy different aspects. I really do wonder if I need to tweak their hitboxes a little bit, because I keep whiffing. I do love this song, though. I'm very happy with how this one came out. I'm going for that arcade sort of thing, like this nailed it, I think. So it's longer than Endurance's too, I believe, by quite a lot. I did make this slowly rise because... So the things that happens is that the rate of drain gets faster and the cost of a turn gets higher. And that was spam fight. And I might have tweaked that after he played to make it harder to get the score he got, frankly. So that just might be straight up outdated now. I don't remember. This gets very stressful. Your level is, again, based entirely on time. So the more time you spend not going, the harder it gets to stay alive. It is actually easier to just spam click and hope for the best, which is basically what he did for like 30 straight minutes. He got to like level 50. I was like, God damn. Like, so you think that's too easy? He's like, yes and no. My hand is killing me. And I'm like, okay, well, you know what? If that's what you have to go through to get there, then so be it. Enjoy your suffering. You made it yourself. I made that for you, I guess. I want different modes to have different vibes, and it's definitely a different vibe. It is the same game, but it is significantly more stressful. It is. It's much harder. You'll note the timer pauses anytime there's an interruption, and you don't mind that on this, you know? You're like, oh, thank God, I get to breathe. It is your one chance to just take a fucking breath, and that's the other reason I'm not too worried about, like, the animations existing. It measures your pace. It enforces a kind of like, hey, stop and just take a second. And sometimes that's really good. And depending on what the mode is encouraging, it could be the point. Little victory fanfare. But again, I think it's part of the game feel. There's always that old phrase, kill your darlings, to think about. I need a nice big red, please. That works. There we go. Just testing it. Gotta make sure it works. You never heard that phrase? Oh, that's an old one. That's writing advice, especially. It's sometimes the thing that's your favorite thing in the story or whatever is going to be the thing that frankly bogs the whole damn thing down, and you'll be better off if you just get rid of it. Sometimes the thing you're partial to is just not good for the end result. It can apply to a lot of things. I love salty food, but if I serve everyone the kind of salt that I think tastes good, they'll die. So sometimes you just gotta let it go. This is also where we get to test if my force reset's working over there, and I think it is. Let's really do a game over print on that to the log. And I got this nice little bank over here I'm building. But see, it's relatively easy to stay alive, but hard to do well. I think getting stars intentionally on this mode is going to be a very different meta than it will be on Endurance. Can't read that right now. Ah! Woo, woo. I still have to show you the sound tool. Don't let me forget the sound tool. I love that sound tool. Hey, there we go. Breathe. I'd be more mad about you not knowing that phrase if I talked about Gavin's backstory more. Oh, I never even thought about that. Interesting problem. Hey, the tip of your mouse is not where the finger points when it's like this. I've never thought about that in the context of the pause menu. That's a fun thing to find. Never pause in the middle of a frantic click session. Interesting. It's a 3-color. You know, we're on 16. 20 on this one's probably the easiest 20 to hit. Out of every plan I have, I think for Frenzy, 20 is... This is the one you go to if you just want to get stars early on something. But it's also kind of the most mindless, so if you're here for the thinky bits, this is kind of the least engaging one. It's great to unwind, though. Do a big, long endurance run, get close, but you can do this. Also, the pitch of this gets higher every time it levels up. Makes me happy. Oh, don't call me right now, Dad. You always call me when I'm streaming. Either streaming or on the toilet, that's when he rings me up. It's the only times. Mind you, I'm streaming a lot. I just, you know... This is, so now I don't get time to think. You'll note that it's draining very fucking quickly, and that starts to become the main issue. Cost of a turn is going up, and you're still trying to frantically make good groups, and I'm dead. 18. Yeah, so you note he beat me by a little bit. His scores are terrifying. This is me kicking ass and feeling amazing, and yeah, Frenzy scores get really high. So that run isn't even remotely on the board. Frenzy is... This is supposed to be your time, so that's not working right. That's straight up sending in the score as a timer. So that's... Alright, I need to make a little list here. I need to make a little list. We got a couple issues we're fighting today. Where's my to-do? A lovely to-do. Yeah, there's my, I need to be mindful what is yeah, let's just put this over here. I don't know what's on there. Some of that might actually make Twitch mad. There is the word cummies, so. Okay, I did that. That can go away. Yeah, scroll down. Orgy. Like, ooh. Okay, these are dead. This is never happening. The prompts did not last long. These are on my Trello. I haven't cleaned these on. Okay. Okay. Save. Okay. Okay. We need... I'm up here. What am I doing? Yeah, that 1 point per time unit seems a bit wrong. So, that's going to need fixed. That one's accurate. Okay. You like that nice slight floating point? Is that fun for everybody? Bye, Spritzy. So like you'll know the time difference between me and Ellen was not that big. But the score is a different story. All right. Well, that's at present Slime Forest. I don't know what people think of that, but it's there. There's that in all of its glory. Options menu in all of its glory. Yeah, I'll have to fix that. That's interesting. I've never thought about that. I'm gonna yawn. Yeah, let's get a new tab. Let's get a new tab. I know what I want to work on next. Okay, so there's some pretty fun tools here. This right here, JSFXR. Welcome. This is a fun way to just make random ding dang sounds. You can play with all these envelopes and go crazy. I use this kind of a lot. This is where most of the sounds in the game come from, actually. Oh, shoot. Hold on, I gotta check in on Game of Claws and commit violence. That's right, Game of Claws. Everyone's favorite game. Claws. What's this say? Private. Take G and Q place for rewards. I'm gonna place for defend. They're after my shit. Hostile preparation phase. Well, whatever. I tried to be good. You're welcome. I was linked. Okay, whatever. So we want a nice noise for the star, right? That's pretty good, right? Ooh, that's okay. I raised the pitch. Uh, I use this thing a lot. I kind of like that. Yeah. Manager's not doing shit. Just turn it off. This is how you annoy everyone in your life. This right here. Um, And then once you have a sound you like, just did a thing. You see. I'll keep it there. That's kind of fun. I can't leave it alone, can I? Hmm. Okay. Okay, yeah, we'll do that. Download it. Download it. This just did a thing. 2 commissions confirmed. Well, dang, I might need to pull those. Well, it's going to be at least 2 days, so. Okay. At least 2 days before I can pull those, because they have to clear. Okay, so I downloaded that. All right, we're going to go in my downloads. We're going to be glad nothing in there is inappropriate. And okay, I'm going to go down here to my sounds in my big mess. My big mess. We're going to add it. And we're going to rename it. Start it. Okay. And you know what I'm going to do? You know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to go ahead. I'm going to go back into puzzle game. I'm going to grab the thing I closed earlier, Star Notice. We're going to come in here and we're going to add it. Audio stream player. And it's going to play. No. No. Dove, is that true? No. Okay. It's going to autoplay the second this comes alive. Max polyphony 1 bus is sounds. Playback is sample. We're going to hit save. And we're going to see how well that works. I don't care. That should work for at least one. I didn't hear my noise. Uh-oh. Why isn't it working? Uh-oh. I'm gonna cry. Tally box. No, not tally box. I guess leave star notice up until we know what's going on. Driver doesn't support sample playback. That's a new one. Hi, Ina. That is straight up a new problem. I've never had that one before. Okay. Liz really wants to play with the new emote. She's finding raisins. Good for her. Okay, there we go. It's a little loud. It's very loud, actually. I think we're going to go ahead and be like, I don't know, -5. We'll see how that works. Thank you. I'm working on my game. Sometimes that entails not just playing my game. Oh, your computer's being naughty. Come on. How's your computer being naughty? That is still really loud. Let's say -15. Iffy about that, but it's so loud and it's gonna stack sometimes. Oh! Because it's not doing what I want, I see. Sometimes it's user error. So, I can only get so mad. Okay, that's acceptable. It happens a lot. I don't want it to be too distracting, but I do want you to be able to be like, okay, I got it. What do we think? It is going to play twice there, but that's... There's things I can do. I can add it to the general sound manager and call it once a frame so it doesn't stack, but I don't know. I don't think it's that big a deal. I can see some people actually preferring the stacking in this one weird case. So, probably gonna leave it. Did the weird thing again. Pretty good. Pretty good little pile. I don't know. Alright. That's enough of that. That's enough of that. That's enough of that. Okay. That works. That works. That's good. That works for now. I'm fine with that. Okay. And the audio bus thing, that's just this. This is what the options menu actually sets the volumes of. So if I come in here and I run it, I'm just like, fuck music. No more music. I like games loud, so there you go. Oh, stretching. I think I gotta go potty. Uh-oh. Yeah. Okay. I'll be back just a second. Everyone stretch. Everyone kiss each other. Everyone dance. Yeah. I found a donut. So yeah, um, there's a quick tour. There's plenty I can work on if that interests people. I don't mind. Um, but what we think is game stupid. Is game waste of time. Welcome back to Forest. I'll take you to my favorite place in the woods. This isn't it. Look, I noticed a secret hole all on my own. This is it. This is my favorite place in the woods. I'm gonna go for a swim. I went for a swim. Welcome to the forest. Which does remind me. No. Dungeon parts. I need to go into Slime Game. Dungeon models. There should be an updated version of the floor. Floor flat. And if I put this in here and I hit play, in theory, it'll fix that weird UV issue I'm having. Yay! Look, the floors match now. It was fine to make sure the script was working, but like, man, it looked ugly. There we go. This dirt looks so pretty. Look at my dirt and tremble mortals. I have a drinking problem. I should have ran an ad when I went to the bathroom. I keep forgetting I can do that. Keep forgetting to do that. I'm a bad girl. I'll never hit the arbitrary withdrawal window of $50 if I don't earn those pennies one at a time. I love my water. It's so silly, but it does the job. Look at it. Imagine being able to swallow water and not die. Mm. You know what else we could do while we're here? Fix that. Fix this fucking shit. What is this about? Hmm. 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 You do a constant array? Hmm. Variant. constant. No. No, I don't think I can do an array. It's a constant. Okay, that's fine. That's probably for the best. I spell neighbor with a U, even though that's very un-American of me. My English is a mess, and everyone should fear me. All right, I want vector 2I. Water. Can I just see my tile set, please? Yeah, there they are. There's my tiles. Look how big they are. Okay. 0, 1 is a water neighbor. I wonder if I have to do this every time. I don't know. Vectors are weird about that. That is 2, 0. 3, 0. Now, if I did this right, in theory, if okay, I'm gonna do this. If ground neighbors no has neighbor up. I need this. There we go. This is easier. Okay, so if it has it, if any of those come up, it should become the right dirt. Enjoy that sentence. It did not become the right dirt. But interestingly, most of them are still being the right dirt, as far as I can tell. So it's still just the bridge is misbehaving. What did I do wrong? 0, 1, 2, 0, 3, 0. Right? Tile set. Let's look at the tile set. What do we got? Hello. Your tile. Your tile doesn't help me. 2, 0. 3, 0. If neighbor, right, if the atlas coordinates of the neighbor that we are checking, I put this in the wrong spot. I'm a dum-dum. Right, let's try that. Hi, Barb. Hey, look. It's the ground. It's working correctly. It's ground colored and stuff. Now, I don't know why you can see a visible issue with the tiling. Like this red corner here. I don't think that's supposed to be happening, and I don't know why it is. Mind you, it's less noticeable when you're walking around. You can still kind of see the tiling. So it could be vertex color, it could be UV. Honestly, it's probably a bit of A and B. I did use vertex colors for these. Like if I turn off the water, you can see it. You know, if I just don't like having the best part of this here. Oops. Yes, the water is wavy. It is the best thing. Hide it. There we go. You can kind of see it gets dark towards the bottom. And that's because I actually used vertex colors a little bit. It's weird without the water, isn't it? Just in the void. Just hanging out in the void. How's everyone doing? Welcome to Void Town. Don't worry. Be back. We're so back! Yee. Actually, I did make the otter, you know. I open the otter, will it work? I mean, I can show off its amazing texture work. Here's my otter I painted. I don't think this will actually work. I think this will just take a dump. Oh, whoa, it actually did work. Kind of. It's extremely shiny. So roughness did not apply, but yeah, we got an otter. There's my otter. There's my otter committing sins. So, you've arrived. There's my otter in the TikTok meme. Ooh, so baby, turn the lights out. That's a gem otter. I've encased him in glass. He's petrified. Enormous otter. Oh shit! I made this little otter. The little otter is meant to show up in the water in theory, but I have to do a bunch of coding with that. And I haven't played with the collision aspects very much. So, sake of argument, can I turn that off? Can I turn most of this off? Oh my god. How do I make you go away? Just put on top of everything. Just put on top. There we go. Okay. Yeah, world map. Woo. Does that break everything if I do it? Probably. Oh, that's fine actually. Okay, cool. Yo, world map. Isn't that sick? Okay. We need a new 8x8 tile. Do you know why? No. Check this out. We're gonna let's see here. Let's just do a nice little like player sprite, shall we? Player sprite. Woo! Player sprite. Um I might get kind of weird with it. That help with readability if I do that? I don't know. I don't know. Uh, like a little needlessly complicated color situation. Ah, maybe. Okay, I need to flip this vertical. We want this to be forward, right? Okay. Okay, save. I guess don't save, because it's really basic, and I just need it as a PNG, so that I can just save it as a PNG, can't I? Yeah, I can just save it as a PNG. Um, Did that work? Is it a PNG? Player compass.png. Hell yeah, dog. Okay. Okay. Oh yeah. Do. Here's what I do. Here's what I do. Here's what I do. What do you gotta do, Sarah? I don't know. Here's what I'm gonna do. We're gonna go down to our delicious textures, and in dungeons, we're going to add this giant, massive sprite. Player compass.png. Okay. Okay. Now we are going to add a child node. Fuck, dude. Node. Beauty. Player start pose. Okay. This is a child. Player start pose. Okay. Player compass. Put you up here. I don't know why you are so big. There we go. There we go. Okay. For the sake of argument, I fucked up. Okay, set your transform to 0. I could just make this. Yeah. Yeah, okay. I'm gonna say player compass. Okay. This here. Okay. Now, in theory, if I rotates you like 180, so you're facing down, there's the player compass. Now, if I just come in here and I hit play, we run around, what's that even gonna do? It's just gonna show up here. For sake of argument, we run all the way over to where it actually is. Does it also draw there? No. Okay. I'm gonna make you a unique name also. Alright, Dungeon Walker. I would like player compass to be right there. Okay. Um, what? In UI. It's in UI. Okay. And navcam is accessible. Okay. I can work with that. Okay. Well, we're ready about. No, I do not. Okay, we're gonna put that right up top. Killing all of that. We have a whole dead room at that. Oh, to the fun part. Not ready. Player compass is fine. Set starting position. I just do position. Yes. Come on, spacebar. Equals. Right. Vector 3. I want to say it is I'm just gonna change this to compass. This is too many letters for something I need to type this many times. Compass dot x 0.0 dot y. Rotate. I believe it is compass dot rotation. That could be horribly fucking wrong. So I'm gonna double check that. We're in the weeds now. We having fun with that? Okay, I need to there we go. I just need to check if this is, yes, that's Y rotation. Okay. So in theory, at play, I explode. You bug spray. You might. Oh. That. Print compass dot position, please. $324.44. Okay, that's wrong on multiple levels. Divided by 8. Divided by 8. That is the wrong line. I don't know how I managed that. Okay. Sector 3. Do. So if I divide this by 8, that should give me the relative position of where the dot is. 40.5, 5.5. Yeah, that's not ideal either. Oh, because it's centered. It's centered, dog. Hi. You shouldn't be centered. You are not centered. Uncenter you. Here we go. At least get the number right. You know what I mean? 41.6. Okay. This should be cell 41.6. I go into the tile map layer, and I go I don't know what's that's 45, so that's still a little off, but that's 41.6. Why is it? Why are you so interesting? I actually do want this centered though anyway, so thinking about the transforms I need to do to it. We are actually going to want this centered. Fine. What a bitch. Okay, well, I'll be happy if I just show up there. See what that says. 40 and 5. Okay, so we want to floor that. So position is working. This is not the right thing. Dungeon Navigator. Translate. I'm gonna floor these, so they're gonna have issues, but that's fine. No. Try that. Why are you so mean to me? Why am I showing up at 0, 0 in the woods? Why do you not take me to magical compass land? I should start here. Why do I not start here? The position is correct. 45. This should be here. Okay. 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 This is an annoying problem for a woman with no spacebar. Shit. Am I at least facing south? I am at least facing south. Huh. I guess that might be Dungeon Walker. Transform. Do. Stop on slow. No, you don't have any of this. You don't have any of this, huh? Transform position. This rotation is set to X. Why would you want it? Okay. Oh, you have lots of angry sprites. Little angry man. I may think I should be facing the wrong way. Interesting. Okay. This is fine. Form alert to target. Oh, I know what I did wrong. Is there a with statement here? Hey, you see these? Hi. So our transform target is a very special, very special little piece of equipment here. So the Dungeon Walker has what is called transform target. And that's how I'm doing all of my animations. So since I didn't actually interpolate anything, well, we're somewhere different. Oh. Uh-oh. But hey, we did achieve something. And we are roughly in the right something. So we're in hell. Okay, no, that's fine. You know what? That's fine. That's actually fine. So, that's progress. That's what progress looks like here. I know that's hard to believe. This is our Z. Yes. This is our X. Yes. So, the 2D axis, that is our X and Y. You want to divide. Sorry, we're not burning anyone alive. I didn't mean to run that again, but it is interesting to see that we wound up here. Incorrect buzzer. All right. But we're getting there. We're getting there. There's some weird, funky math going on. Okay. The compass needs to match position. The compass is in the proper position. I'm going to just leave that there for now. Transform target. Now, if I, for the sake of argument, turn these off and we hit play, what happens? Do I go yeet? No, I just appear there. That's just where we start. I'm not sure why that's where we start. It shouldn't be where we start, but it's where we start. So, okay. All we need to do is fuck with the transform target. So here we go. Transform targets Got all these things I can use. They're hard-coded right now. I don't recommend that. Needs more fire. Okay, well I'll think about adding a volcano later. Okay, we'll turn that water shader into some nightmarish lava just for y'all. Okay. Move fail animation. Okay, animate bump. Transform. Okay, so the Q is strafe. Translate object local. Blanc, blanc. That's fine. Animate bump. Transform target. E is the other strafe. Rotate. Degrees to radians. All right, next question. Print compass dot rotation. Is it degrees? No, it is in fact radians. Okay. Rotate vector 3 degrees to rad. Oh. Okay. I go ahead and do that. Should be fine. Sake of argument, we should still be facing south. We face north. We are okay, so it is doing that. It is doing that. Is pi available? Yes, pi is available. So if I do that, it should face south, because apparently this object faced south by default. Cool. We're now facing the right direction. We're not in the right spot, but we are facing the right direction. Okay, we're going to do something weird down here. We are going to, in physics process, print position. This is probably going to be stupid. It's going to flood this whole damn thing, but fine. I want to know where I'm at. 41, negative 4.25? How the fuck? Pardon? Transforms to local point. Yeah. Translate. Change those positioned by the given offset. Uh-huh. All right, that's not what I want. I can't affect position directly, so I just say position. Come on, spacebar. I know your life is hard. Let's see what that does. You weird ass sack of crap. Mighty limited. Well, we went to the right spot, and we are in the dirt. So hey, congrats, Bird. We got to jump in, and we can absolutely see where the dirt tiles are working. So that's good. I don't know why this one is. Oh, because it has the log. It has the log. Dreams came true for Bird. We're going for a swim. Okay. So, Dungeon Walker. I just keep position dot. I just keep that. Hey, look at that. We're where we're supposed to be. It's a miracle. Progress. You. Say goodbye to the forest. Okay, cool. Look, we did a thing. We did a thing. I've made progress. I can now get rid of a lot of stupid crap. I will now get rid of this. Okay. Okay. Hello. I am now making some headway. Okay, so here's what we want to do. Okay. Reparent to navcam.get parent. True. That is the wrong thing. Thank you. Try that. You did not do as I asked. Let us look at where you are. You did not go into the hole. Why did you not go into the hole? Can't add child to nav port. Already has parent dungeon test tile. What? Remove child. Oh, is there a reparent deferred? Oh my god. Okay, hold on. I know what's happening. Oh, say hello to my tab again. Godot call deferred. Some classes get hurt from the object. Each class may find new. I would like to find deferred. Call deferred. Calls the method on the object during idle time. Always returns null, not the method result. Oh, okay. We run until there are none left, which means you can defer calls from other deferred calls and they'll still be running the current idle time cycle. Try not to cause infinite recursion, idiot. Got it. Um, Call deferred reparent. Okay, is that correct? And we provide the arguments. Okay, we reset. Well, it's not in where it was. It has gone somewhere else. That's fine. Go into 2D view on remote. This is a mess to look at. It should be right here. Player compass. Player compass's position is the same as it was. Okay. What if I set it to like 10, 10? What if I reset the whole room because I had a better idea? What if the player compass was, I don't know, drawn behind everything? and needed to be higher in the z-index. What about that? Top level show behind parent ordering. Higher is better. Okay, what's the world map z-index? Also 0. It's navcam. Okay, well that's concerning because I don't know where it is, but it should be the same exact freaking place. For the sake of argument, I'll give it a z-index of 1. It doesn't matter. Okay. Well, it's in here somewhere. And that's all we know. Somewhere in this wretched world, sake of argument, the easiest test. What if I set this to false? And we run that. Nothing good. But it is reparenting, so that's working. All right. Well, when this happens... do 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 do. Try this. Let's try this. Let's try this. Let's try this. Oh boy, I got to figure out through the space bar. This thing's busted. Okay, we want it to be our position. Position.z. 8. Compass should move with the player now. Now, where is the compass? I don't know. When I'm here and when I'm somewhere else, it should be in a different position. And that's what we're going to start with. So, 320, 40. Fine. Do-do. 320, 56. Yes, it is updating. Okay, so I don't know why it's not drawing, but it is updating. The question is, how do I get it to actually show the fuck up on here? That, if I go in here, player compass, you'll see the rotation is at 0, which means it's pointing up. But it is turning. Okay, so we just need to add the frickin' plus pi to it. I don't know why that offset's the way it is. I guess I made down forward instead of up. It's fine. It's fine. Okay, there we go. The compass is now following. Where the hell is it? Here's my beef. Nav viewport has the camera. This is specific to the nav viewport because you cannot set draw layers in 2D because the game is evil. You have to put everything in a subview as a child of the subview. That is apparently how this works. That doesn't feel right, but that's all I could find. So, all right. Cool. The limitation of 2D. 3D, you can do different cameras, see different layers, but for some reason 2D can't. I don't know. Um, Now there is the potential issue that it's just out here. I don't know. Okay. Hold up. So if I go remote view, does this actually show me if things move? I don't think it does. No, it doesn't. It could still be drawing over here is the problem, which means that the only way to actually make it come on screen would be to like... Oh, well, that solves that. Yeah, that does seem overly simplified. Now, alternatively, I could just set the damn thing to always be centered in there regardless. Then, like, as a child of nav container, I could cheat and do that, I guess, but it wouldn't show up here. Or would it? I wouldn't have to update the position that way. Okay, hold on. We're gonna play. We're gonna play. Reparent nav container. Navcam's parent dport view. I'd have to call parent 4 times. I think it'd just be better to just fucking do this. Alright. Let's just make it nav container layer compass dot local position. I don't get to do that. Okay. Equals. We want the dead ass center of this. Okay, now I did math. This should be pretty straightforward, but it's not gonna be because it doesn't love me. Okay, here we go. Layout 65 by 65. We need the dead center of 65. Okay. 32, 33, 32, 33. It's an even fucking number. I guess I'll put it on 32 and see what happens. Oh, we'll see what happens. Where did I just put that? No, don't you hide from me. 32, 30, 32. Okay, if I did this right, it should just show up there. Bingo. And if I rotate, left, up, right. Okay, so I need to do minus pi. Don't worry about it. Up works. Yeah, it's facing the wrong. Okay. It did minus pi. No. Okay, position's fine. That works fine for positioning. Okay, the rotation. I don't know. What if I did negative rotation y plus pi? What then, little mans? What then? Left, right, right. That looks right to me. And no one ever has to know that I absolutely cheated my little dick off to make that work. Aha! Good thing it's not on camera or anything. Hey, there we go. We got a compass now. Look at that. Ooh, it works. Isn't that fun? Strafe, strafe. If I was a demon with a creepy smile, I think I'd be as creepy as I possibly could just to make that smile worth having. Yeah. Yeah. Yes, the internet never remembers anything. Hi, Nona. How are you? Also, Liz reached a 15 stream streak. I didn't even notice that earlier. Good job, Lizzie. But yes, there's a little progress on the dungeon crawl. There's a new sound. There's eye pain, courtesy of a very shiny otter. Why are you... Wait. Oh, 15 streak because you're hot as fuck. You're right. I mean, I've seen the possum, and that's basically you in real life, so. And we still have no collision, but we have movement. We have fake walls. I feel like we got short again. Why are we short again? Why am I short again? Excuse me? I guess I did something that made it undo something. I don't know. Now I'm nice and tall. And none of you can stop me from being nice and tall. I don't think 0.75 meters is particularly tall, but it does let you see the gaps, and that's what I was after. So, there we go. And this is a nice little framing when you're in the trees, I think. I like it. Anyway, Liz, we'll see who's shorter once you're on your knees. Ha 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 ha. Gotcha. We need to make the bridge tile. And we need to make stuff like chests and have the enemies do things. We have stuff to do. There's lots of stuff to do here. But, compass. Yay, compass. I still don't have mouse navigation for my otherwise entirely mouse-based game, so that's... Oh yeah, that one's tricky to spot. Okay, if you're not looking right at them, they are not the most obvious. Like, you can kind of see it. It is a distinct change in the pattern. Anyway, fuck the pattern. I'm a cheater. I love my log. So happy. It's the first time I actually did my own, like, unguided texture painting. I had to modulate a little bit, make it match, but it you know, just a little bit of dark gray made a huge difference. It looks, I love my log. So happy with my log. That's what she said after she got off the toilet. Oh, whatever. You know. So, all right. One more thing to do here. You have too many things in one object here. Tick drain. Multiplayer grace girl threshold drain pop pose last born level girl go flag girl blah, 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 blah. Stars to add. What do you think here? I'm gonna stretch again. I think I know what I want to do here. I'm gonna stretch. I'm gonna do that thing you do where you run an ad for a minute. Enjoy ads for a minute while I stretch and ponder and whatnot. How long's it been? Is this justified? Yeah, 2.5 hours. I think one ad's not gonna kill anybody. Liz is dancing for you, so enjoy her bony butt. Burb. Which would mean BRB, not whatever. Yeah. Well, Liz, you're really inhaling everything, huh? Oh, I'm plugging away, but you know, if you don't see the ads, then congrats. You can see me thinking. Okay. 2 stars plus equals 1. Oh, I'm reworking this again. Stars to add plus equals turn stars. This means this is no longer needed. But I am going to keep this make sure the previous chain tally is finished. Just in case. Alright? Here's start. Okay. Now, we used to have this exponentially increasing. I'm going to change it to the, I don't know if linear is the right word. Star tally that I was, the way I do the slime scores. And we'll see if this goes a little bit better. But that is a very straightforward edit. While we're at it, submit scores. Game mode endurance. A score. That's why we're not getting a stars list yet. Okay, if frenzy profile has scores minutes. If time. Now is time submitted? Score time float. Oh my god. Score game time stars. There we go. There's that. So we need to figure this out. Time. Score was the best times frenzy score. Time. Yes, you can put Pop-Tarts in the toaster. Okay. Well, I'm gonna have to like go straight up in the app data to fix that, so. Oh, Slime's Forest. Okay. Choke names, choke star. Okay, we need friends stars, friends times. Jeez, man. I don't know how long he lived. I want to say it was like 140, and I did like. I'm just gonna do this. I don't really care. This is a very rough approximation. I'm just gonna scale it down fast because this is only for me. I could delete this and not care. But hey, if he ever does get out of prison and gets in here, he's gonna be like, where's my score? And I'm gonna be like, oh no, man. How's therapy? Okay. That should fix the pain I'm feeling in my soul. I guess I should check my save. Here's a save file. How do you like it? Frenzy times frenzy times. Yeah. These are just going to be 0 across the board. I do not care. I will set new ones. I'm not concerned with that. Suppose I should add some sort of reset local boards option in there. But, one thing at a time. Quality of life stuff is shockingly not the first things you program into your games. I've never had a frozen Pop-Tart, to be fair. I do eat them straight from the pack a lot. I should probably just run the game normally. Just run the game normally. Just run that normally. I don't know if Nona's been here for a lot of this. Hi. Welcome to Slime Forest. This is the part that's not a dungeon crawler. I'm working on stars. A thing I've wanted for a long time, and now have. How exciting. Let's see what happens. Sure. That tallies up way too fast. Tallies up way too fast. You really get to see it. Let's figure that out later. That's a... I don't know as much how to fix that. They're working. Like, everything seems to be working as intended. It's all just presentational stuff I gotta figure out, which... That's half the game, man. To be fair, I don't think I've really done a proper dev stream before. I've shown my game on stream a couple times when I'm, like, doing art stuff. I wasn't sure how much people would like just watching me mess around for a bit, but you know what? I'm gonna try it. Well, try properly doing it. That's fine. Yes, there's some stars. There we go. That felt pretty good. Alright. Good. I still wish this tally worked a little better, but the basics are there, and they're solid. And that's what starts matter. Also, this was something I fixed recently. They just stay flat or whatever, and would just soft whatever it was, and then reset wholly once this... So you actually get to see your girls. I should play them, like, going back down. I just... gotta figure out how I want to go about that. Exactly. So, one thing at a time. The art part is the hard part. Which is probably weird to hear the artist say. But it very much is the hardest part. It's where the most time has to go. I'm glad people are interested in my strange little thing. Part of why I put it there. If you look at the Slime Forest stuff and then you stay for the smut, then hey, congratulations. You probably could not more be my target audience. Honestly. Oh no, what do we do? Yeah, that'll work. Do I have to use the rainbow to hit button? Yeah. What's up, Limited? Mug. I just have to hover over Twitch emotes. I never know what I'm looking at with my shitty eyes. Is there a way to make it just bigger? Just make the chat bigger. there a setting I can do to be like, I want to see chat better? Or I just gotta like zoom in. Just full on zoom in. I guess just zoom in works. Seems alright. I can't use half of my interface now because it's all stinking squamped. I'm squamped. I can make this smaller. Yes, yes. Don't mind me just tweaking my panel layout on my end. Yes. No, yeah. That's fair. I just want to see what anyone's even doing. I have bad eyes. I do not have the best vision in the world. Okay, so everything Gucci. Everything's Gucci. Wow. I didn't know there was a third-party program. That's kind of interesting in itself. Yo? Well, dang. I don't know what my numbers are. I know they're scary. I barely know what the numbers mean. You'd think someone with horrible vision, they'd be like, here's what these mean. It's like blood pressure. They just assume I know what all this crap is, and I have no idea. Huh. There, see, that's interesting. Lizzie spoil me, Lizzie spoil you. Welcome to Spoiled Town. Population plus. Oh, this will make that. If I do this, it will make that. It's not bad. It's not a bad move. Hello? Something clicked on the Streamlabs events. I gotta figure out why that's so desynced. That's a problem. Oh, I feel like I'm getting greedy now. I'm like, I can make this bigger. I can make this bigger. Remember I sat down to test something? Anyway. This happens a lot. Like, I'm gonna test that real quick. Oh, I'm playing a whole game. Probably a good sign, frankly. Now, that is most of the board. Right? So... that's good. And that's plus 10. That's not bad at all. So I'm playing with a fidget toy and my little... you know. Oh yeah, I got the same thing. Yeah. That's not too big a deal. That's just... that basically means you cannot read the street signs. Also, the whole you need to see pedestrians thing. They're pretty big on the seeing pedestrians. I know. It's stupid. Not hitting people with your car or whatever. I get it. It's fine. Me either. I'm nearsighted as shit, dude. I can barely see my own hand in front of my face. It's bad. But it's an astigmatism thing. It's like if I look out the window and it's like sunrise or something, I can see the hill in the distance. Like outside of town, I can see the hill and the vague shape of trees. It's just that they're all like overlapping each other. There's like multiple layers of it. So it's interesting. I have interesting eyes. I cannot read without glasses on hardly, unless it's like right in my face, and then it's bad for me because it's too close to my face. Just a blind bitch. Are we having a glasses fight? Is it glasses fight time now? I'm the blind bitch. I'm the blind bitch. I will win. I have my mother's eyes. I don't know my prescription. I should really get it updated. I know that. But I know it's bad. I know it's worse every time. And I'm not thrilled about that for me. I have bad eyes. At least I'm not colorblind. That would make my job harder. Though I am pretty good with black and white, so I'd be fine. I could do the porn thing black and white. I'd enjoy it, frankly. I love working in black and white. It just never feels like what people want. The note of colorblind, I need to make this more friendly. I try to slap a grayscale over it, like the blue is meant. I tried to do the Splatoon thing where there's different values, and I think the blue is dark enough. I tried to make red brighter, I think. Might have been a fool's errand, but I do want to support different palettes going forward, and I think some of the default ones you start with are going to be like high contrast or just grayscale. Well, that is bad. Alright, I've never had corrective surgery, so I think straight up can't see beats whatever I've got going on. If we're having a contest, I think Nona won. Historically, not so much these days. Former champion Nona Swami is is here to tell the kiddies how it's done. You think you're blind? Let me teach you about blind. Ooh, that is blind. That's literally blind. Yeah. Oh, can't top that. Can't top eyeballs straight up no work. You know? I got eyeballs blurry. I don't got straight up eyeballs no work. That's rough. That's one of my big fears, actually. I've even done the thing where you walk around the house with your eyes shut, like seeing if I could get away. I'm bumping everything. I'm bumping everything with my eyes open. My vision sucks, and my sense of space is bad. I don't see good. But I also don't stuff good. I don't know. I have 82 stars already. I'm at level 10. This is working great. So the idea of what I did, instead of making an exponential growth, I do the linear growth like I do with the slime score. It means smaller things matter more. You get more points, and bigger things are not as obscene. Like, you will not get 4,000 for 13 rainbow slimes now. You will still get a lot. I'm sure it's about a couple hundred. I could sit here and do the math. I don't know, whatever. Here, let's do it. 13, let's go. 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus 6 plus 7 plus 8 plus 9 plus 10 plus 11 plus 12 plus 13. 91. I was way off. You'll get 91. But you're also getting like 6 if you just get 3 in one turn instead of 2 or 4 or whatever. So it has skewed it so that big thing's still good, little thing more valuable than it used to be. I think that's good. Is that what that's called? Geometric? That's very good to know. I've been thinking that's got to have a name or something this whole damn time. I just don't know it. Oh, I should pay attention to that. Go! That's pretty good. Alright. That's incredibly good to know. So yeah, that's what it is. I didn't know it had a name. I figured it should, if nothing else, it should have a name. It seems like it would. So, if that's it, then awesome. Extremely good to know. I think it works very well for this situation. But people have found it kind of unintuitive. If I try to explain it, like, oh, that's weird. I'm like, yeah, well. I think it encourages the kind of player behavior I want, so that's what I'm doing. Because I do want small moves to have value. I want little things to add up. But I do want you to be like, oh, dopamine when you get the big shit. That's why the numbers get bigger. Like, oh my god, look at all the red. Do I want to just cash in the rainbow and double this? Or do I want to try to stack rainbow? I want to cash in the rainbow and double this. Do it. That is so much red. That was the big popper. with the big old jingle. There's 4 jingles. I almost never hear the 4th one, but when I do, I'm really glad I put in the 4th one. It feels good. It feels good to get the 4th one. Like, oh yeah, I got the good one. But it's just nice. Okay. Oh, don't remind me of my bank account. I think I'm 30 overdrawn now. Oh, Jesus. Right. I know it did it this time. Usually it's the phone bill. I think something just slipped through. We got most of the bills paid. We got Comcast still. There's always Comcast. I'm so sick of Comcast. They're so expensive and they're so hard to actually get. But they are kind of how I can do my job, so it's gotta do it. But oh, I'm already there, huh? Okay. Ooh, okay. So the dungeon crawl and the puzzles interaction. I haven't actually elaborated on this much. It's still very brainstormy. I wish I had some visuals. I wish I had. I should do some concept stuff. But this is all about like resource management and about grouping things together. Obviously, so I thought for combat, I would steal. I'm forgetting how to sentence again, guys. Take what NIS does with like team attack sort of a thing and mix it with like a time unit system, which the most famous one is Grandia, but that's also really complicated, like Grandia 2 especially. But like even a lot of mobile games use TU. That's where I got it. Evertale and Tokyo Debunker both use it. I'm not recommending either of those games, but if you were going to try one, try Evertale. At least lets you play the game. Don't stick with it. Tokyo Debunker is better for sticking with because it has a good like plot thing going on. Evertale's just a time sink. And it doesn't respect you, and it lets you play it less and less as you go. But the core thing, the time unit, I'm getting distracted. I'm bad at speeches. I never passed public speaking. Time units would mean I could... you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go full fucking, like, pirate software in the sense that I'm going to... You know what? Here, have a big black board. And I'm going to draw on the big black board. I'll be like, my dad worked at Blizzard. Okay. So like on the top of the screen, right? Let's say we just have we'll just put a line for now. We'll represent it with a line, and we'll have like your party of 3 girls, and let's say you take in whoops. Well, that's forest colored. You know, I could just gouge your eyes out, I guess. Do hot buttons work in... No. Wow. You have your green slime. You've got your, like, your red slime and your yellow. Those will be your starters, probably, right? So, you'll have different actions, and we'll just make the enemies purple. Be like, me, I'm a bad man. I'm a frowny face. I don't like you. Frowny face. 3 bad guys, frowny face. Something like this, right? Okay. So here's the idea. You'll have different actions on your turn, right? That green is not green enough for me. Fuck you, dark green. Okay. that really blends. That tracks. Just use the fill tool, Sarah. Yay, it exists. So when you get a turn, you'll have like attack, you'll have like defend, you'll have like spell A, B, whatever, stuff like that, right? The skills or whatever. And different things will have different amounts of time they use, and you'll like, I don't know, you'll pick one. And then the time you use will determine how far down this bar you go, right? So these two are next to each other. And the idea is that when this one attacks, I don't know if you can see the pen on screen, but when the first one attacks, it's just a normal attack. When the second one attacks, it gets like a 10 or 25% bonus, whatever. They team up. So if you time it right, you can get your third person in here. And then you'll have a 3 attack. So if it's 25% each time, that's, you know, 1.5x power for whatever the hell this person does. I'm working with a mouse, can you tell? So 1.5x power for the third guy. Now, if this one does something that puts it right here, it can go again, and then that's a fourth one. Now you're at 1.75. You can keep doing that. I was also thinking if all three of your units attack, it triggers like a freaking rainbow blast. Pretend this is a rainbow, okay? Pretend this is nice and legit. This is so a rainbow, guys. Look at my pretty rainbow, guys. This is how rainbows work. That's, you know, it could be worse. Big old bonus strike because all three of your dudes attacked in one run. And have that happen at the end or whatever, and it gets this final multiplier applied to it. So the more guys you can do, yeah. Yes, and then I was thinking inversely, you let the enemies do the same thing. So now you have the risk-reward thing, because again, I have this big old risk-reward thing going on here. You make the bigger groups have bigger payoffs, but at the risk of running out of energy. So if the enemies can stack up, and this guy does something that puts them like over here, well, now they have this 3-row, and you got to try to interrupt that, or they're going to get real strong. They don't get the big team blast because I'm not coding that, but there you go, right? And that plays into the core ideas of how the actual thing works. Also, I'm stealing Labyrinth of Refrain's enemy thing. So on the field, you got your fucking grid or whatever, right? Instead of random encounters, you'll get enemies marching on the field, and they can just be like going around like, here's a bad guy, and here's you, right? They have an awareness of like one tile around them usually, and they just kind of march around unless they see you here, and then they react differently. And you can navigate around that. You have the obstacles, you can like hop over, they can't. Stuff like that. So navigation is also kind of a puzzle. And then I was thinking of having enemy groups that are, instead of commons and elites, I have predators and prey. So prey, since you're a hungry little slime, you go around, you find things like gummy worms, and you fight the gummy worms. I can show you the gummy worms. Oh my god, we have gummy worms, guys. Don't go in the Liz's commission folder right now. You'll get banned so fast, Sarah. Okay. Monsters. Yeah, check it out. We got an actual gummy worm. We got a gummy worm, right? So there's the predator prey thing. Prey animals are easier. Your slime girls, I was thinking they can eat and gain stamina, or not stamina, like a bonus to like a well-fed bonus or something like that. I'm still considering exactly how it'll work, right? Again, it's all theoretical. It's all this and that, and then predators on the flip side, they want to slurp your slime, baby. They are not as good as food. They're not good for food, but they have their own benefits for fighting. Like if you've ever played Disgaea, the item world has like the bonus meter you can fill. I was thinking, this is all just thoughts right now. None of this is implemented. None of this is like promises. Oh, right. If I really want to trademark in French, I could make a sour gummy worm. Instead of a recolor, he's got the like white crystals on him and he's like bright blue. That's fun. I might do that. Mosquito and slime. So as you fight predators, increase, I'm calling it for now the apex meter. At some point if that fills, good, it should remind you of Rayman. I was going for that vibe. That fills up, predators probably stop spawning or something, or they start running from you like prey do or something because you're the apex predator, but also, it gives you better odds of like, here, I swap mosquito for you. Better odds of getting like different floor modifiers or something as you go, like, treasure rooms or something like that. That's the thinking. There's a lot of steps to get there first. Right now I am working on adding collision to the dungeons. So one thing at a time, but that is my thinking. I want the same sort of methodical strategy thing to play into everything. And then also these help reward each other, the modes reward each other in different ways. Yeah. So that's the thinking right now. Now, in terms of how they feed each other, as I do stuff in here, and this, again, it's not implemented yet. This is all like relatively recently encouraged thought of like, I know what to do. I've been trying to figure out what I wanted to do exactly to make this marketable for a while. Because this was the main game. This is just what I've been polishing for like a year or two now. Just this core thing. but it doesn't feel like I'm going to get people that interested in just it, because it's just a basic puzzle game. But as I do things, like I made rainbow slimes or whatever, play different modes, each my status screen, instead of just being like your player stats or something like a big old Smash Brothers scroll bar, you'll have different slime girls in the slime garden. And this is something I planned before the dungeon. This is what I wanted for a stat screen. Different stuff you do was always going to like make the girls stronger, level them up, sort of thing. Number of slimes cleared, highest level reach, stuff like that. Games played, stats that build up over time, and it was originally just unlock new cutscenes or whatever, but I'm already going to be tracking all that shit anyway. So I'm like, okay, so I can use that and have that level up your girls and their stats. So playing this will help make your girls stronger for the dungeons. In the dungeons, you can find gear, in theory, again, this is just ideas, that like accessories or something that you, as the slime witch or whatever, the person that is helping them reform their species, can equip at the start of a run to modify how the run works, which in turn can help you focus on different stats, pursue different scores, stuff like that. Yeah, the puzzle's great. I love the puzzle. I also want to reward playing without any of the modifiers. Like, I want to have different leaderboards for if there's mods on or off, and I want to have like in-game achievement list sort of thing. If I do something like that, I want to have like a silver medal if you do it with mods and a gold if you do it without, or like gold and diamond or something. You know, something like that. I want people to feel encouraged in some way or other, and again, I'm still considering the details and how exactly I want to do all this, to play without mods, but the mods will help them, especially if you're focused on dungeons or unlocking different things. The mods can help you do that. That's the idea. That was not as big as I thought it was. Crap. Alright. Yeah, the puzzle's good. A good chunk of my time, quote unquote, developing the game is spent playing the game. To the point it's almost a problem. I love playing the game. And I've been trying to work on things on the side to make this more like beta ready, where I can actually send it and have people try it. Like the leaderboards and stuff actually working. That's a pretty big one. So, I think I just died. No, I'm at like 0 again. How do I keep doing that? How do I keep being so close to dead and getting away with this? 0.0. I'm just at 0.0, I guess. Alright. Well, yeah, no, the mods are risk-reward, some of them. Some of them just screw with you. Some will affect your score, some will affect how hard it is to make the girls and what they do. Some of them will make it affect how rainbow slimes appear or work. Like, I want to have one that makes it so sometimes a rainbow slime just shows up. Just shows up. You just get one. And that can be useful if you're playing a certain way or whatever, and, you know, stuff like that. Things that... I'm gonna die on 13. Yeah. Different ways. Yeah, it's funny. Like I had a chart somewhere. I have so many things, dudes. I have been, again, it's been a couple of years at least. I started this when I was still employed, so I've been unemployed for 2 years now, pretty much. But I don't know, Slime Force class sheet. This is where I've been hiding everything. This is all junk at this point. Yeah, modifiers I've thought of. Some of these are just like help you do a little better. Flatline, once per game, sacrifice all multiplier and overflow meter to fully recover upon game over. Your score will be shit, but you'll live a little longer, and if you're just trying to hit level 20 to unlock stars, cool. That'll help you do it. More energy recovery when you level up, just helps you live. This one, give up, level up energy recovery, because every time you level up, you gain whatever amount of energy you were supposed to, like, whatever the added cost is for a turn per level, it gives you just as a safety, because it used to kill you if you were under that line. I've changed it. It only kills you if you're under 0 now. So you can, in fact, A, live at 0, but B, you used to be able to level up and that kills you, because the cost for a turn would go up and you wouldn't have enough energy to do it. So that meter used to only be worth 3, because if it was below that first line, you just died. that felt terrible, and eventually I went, this feels terrible, and I changed it. So now you only die if it's empty when your turn's supposed to start. I'm out of water. Yeah. So this one gives you more points the higher level it is, and your multiplier applies to it. It's a pretty decent little score. Increase energy recovery, but you sacrifice score. This goes up to like stars are disabled no matter what. You can have no points and just hit level like 50% bonus energy recovery. That's the idea. And that is, again, you're not going to get on the leaderboards, but it will help you grind out stats for your dungeons and shit, because working in the puzzle makes your girls stronger for the dungeon. That's the idea. And the dungeon, in turn, unlocks those things, gives you the stuff to increase them. Katie was talking about having a currency earlier. I was thinking of having it so that you can find currency in the dungeon and you earn currency by playing. Might just be how many slimes you... yeah, that sounds right. Since I lost my train of thought. I looked at chat and I went brain fart. Point being, I'm spending a lot of time thinking about how to make this all work together in a fun and interesting way, because I am very happy with the puzzle I have, Frenzy Time, and I'm proud of it. I think it's a good game, but I also, I love RPG shit. I love making RPG Maker shit. I love doing stuff like that. I love designing these dumb systems. I'm broken. I'm weird, but it excites me, and it gives me ways to tie some ideas I've had together and justify the narrative thing I want to do and all this other stuff. And it just seems interesting. It seems interesting to do the genre mashup. And Puyo Pop has toyed with it for ages. It started off as a spin-off of Monogatari or whatever. So those two it's always been connected to a dungeon crawler, but they never had Puyo Pop in the dungeon crawler. It's just had Puyos as like a slime enemy. And I was like, I'm not a coward. I'll put them together. I'm weird like that. Work with me. There we go. So the next step will probably be to add the stars to the leaderboard. Oh, again, I thought it was bigger than it was. My eyes are... I should probably like eat dinner. I haven't really done that. I said I'd bake a cake tonight, so I'm probably done after this game. But a little bit of progress, a little bit of talking. I got to show it to people. This is Frenzy Mode. If you didn't see me play it last time, it's your energy drains constantly. Turn cost is relatively low. Good luck, asshole. It's a very different way of playing. And by far the easiest rule set to earn the star, unlock stars. I've tried to focus on like good game feel stuff, like the arcadey vibe is a big one, the score pops and stuff. The sound feedback is something I've been trying to work on more lately, because I've gotten to the point where sound is a viable thing to work on. So we got the multiplier noise now, we've got the whatchamacallit, the star one. We just added the stars. No touch blue. No touch. I can't do that for 5 minutes. The board will fill. Shit. Okay, I'll do it as long as I can. How's that? If I run out of things to do that aren't touching blue, I will have to touch blue. Okay? Oh, but I might have a cheeky workaround. I do have a cheeky workaround. Okay, wait, I think no touch blue can work if I approach it like this. I'm not touching blue. I touched rainbow. So I can only pop them with the rainbow. I have to use rainbow to pop blue. I hope that's acceptable, because that's actually really interesting. That's a mean little challenge. I like it. We'll see how far we get that way. I love this song. I'm so happy with this song, man. I'm trying to get away with murder now. Problem solving's half the game. So yeah, I did problem solve my way out of it. Oh, that's a big number. Can't touch blue. Cannot touch the blue. I wanted to. I almost did. I almost touched that blue. Okay. Okay, this is working. I'm getting away with it. It's getting a little dicey, but it's working. Okay, fine. All right. I don't know. I hope you guys like my music. I haven't really shared it much anywhere with this one, but I don't make music as much as I used to. I love doing it. It is a huge time sink sometimes, so that's the works. Wait, what did I just touch? Did I touch blue? Am I naughty? I kind of blanked out for a second. I looked at chat. Shit. Going to jail. The blue is lava. The blue is lava. I'm sorry. I won't do it again, Mommy. To be fair, I didn't set a timer either. I'm like, I'm just going to do this the whole time. Thank you, Ina. So I don't get to look at chat unless I have a break like that. The second I fuck up and don't get a rainbow, I'm so fucked. Shit, we're in trouble. Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. It's over. Couldn't touch the blue. I died for you, Lizzie. I died for you. Hey, look, the time works. Uh-huh, cat. Let's say about that. There you go. Oh. Yeah, I should probably round those or something. Round it down to 2 digits or something. And also, this is on the note of Disc Guy Inspirations. The art is supposed to be random, but I've only drawn the one. And I am intending to have the tip be random every time you lose, too. And I mentioned earlier, like, how will the player find out about X or Y? Their initial instructions are pretty straightforward and vague. This needs to be changed. This is still just a font placeholder. And as you go, as you play, you'll get more information with every fuck up, basically. Little bits of knowledge that you can build upon and get more intimately familiar with the game. That's the idea, anyway. And that ties into why I don't just highlight every match that you're making or, tell you how many it's going to be before you click it or whatever. I want people to, eat my raw flow, bitch. 9999988. I want people to gain a sort of sense and familiarity of things. I don't tell you when you're about to hit 40 if you click. I let you figure out by, vibes when you're going to hit 40. I think that's more interesting. It leaves that little uncertainty, that need to act with confidence. That's what I think is engaging about that. Um, it's just part of the idea. I think it is more engaging. Oh, Silence mad. Okay. 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 Um, I'll go back in here because I don't think Nona got to see this, and I am gonna eat after this, so this will be the end of the stream. What was I saying? All right, I want people to get familiar with it. I don't want to just hand you all the information outright and have you solve it like a one-off Sudoku puzzle. I want you to kind of get your own feel, get your own play style, get your own strategy, and if people come together and make some fucking meta, fun. But I want it to be enjoyable on a more personal level, which is, again, I mean, that's why they fucking refer to you by name, you know, whatever your name is, douche sucker 69. Have fun with that, I guess. So again, you're the one picking what you're called the whole game. That's your fault. I want a certain kind of. I'm not enforcing a certain kind of engagement. I am funneling, sort of. I am trying to help people find a flow in this, and that is why ultimately, like, it is going to be like, here's endurance mode, here's how to play. And then it's going to funnel you into like tutorial dungeon, and win or lose on that, it's then just going to let you run free, do whatever you want, basically. And I do want it to be possible, if you are so inclined, to make some amount of progress if you just really like one mode and don't want to bother with the other. Enough so I'm thinking of giving both different storylines, kind of. I have a whole idea for like a villain in the. Oh, I think my tiling's off on that by 1 pixel. A villain in the what you call it? So fucked. A villain in the dungeon one. So the main one is, you're trying to figure out what happened and help them repopulate, and then the dungeon is like, what if things are feeding on the slimes? What's something that would just eat a lot of goo? Why not a fungus? So it's like, as opposed to the slime wizard and shit that you're working with, there's a mushroom wizard on the other side of the forest, and they're your rival or something like that. That was my idea for that one. Get Animal Crossing. But also, I want to like kind of encourage with rewards to try different modes. That's why so much of the dungeon is about giving you prizes that make puzzles more interesting and more personalizable, like, the accessories, the modifiers, the skins, and the puzzles boost your dungeon level. It is innately trying to nudge you into trying things that might be out of your comfort zone, and part of that is because both of these genres are kind of out of my comfort zone, and yet I really like both of them when I give them a chance, and I think if you mush them together and you kind of lure people in with both, and they might find something that they love about both, and that's part of what interests me. That's what excites me. I don't know. It was an interesting idea, and it's more marketable, so win-win. Built-in Godot effects, very fun. On the fence about making this not do this if you turn off, like, flashing lights. I don't know. This is the first cutscene I've even started making, so playing with the animation stuff, making the objects that interact, that's been part of it. I am using dialogue system, a plugin someone made. I forget the name of it. It's very common. If you look for Godot dialogue system, this is the one. I don't think there's any others. I think everyone just went, no, this does it. This is good. So this is one everyone uses, and I have some custom stuff going on with it, and I've been learning how to use it all. Um, yeah. I fixed the holes. EMD. Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, right? Did I do it? Did I get the acronym, Mommy? Do I win the prize? Okay, sorry. Is that still Pokemon Mystery Dungeon? Because if it is, I have not been sold properly on those fucking games. I don't need more viewers. I'm happy with my viewers. If more viewers want to come, then fine, but I'm not going to pay for fake ones. Good job, Lizzie. The next thing I want to do is test out having multiple choices, because I don't think I set up the window right for that. I know how I do it, and I'm not even necessarily going to have those choices always matter, but letting you feel like you have your personality. But again, personalization is part of what I'm looking for. So, and I have to stress, not a porn game. You will not F the slimes, okay? It's meant to be a misunderstanding. She does not know human very well, okay? Now, if you want porn of them, on the other hand, you know where my VGen is. I love money. I've never had too much money, okay? There's always something I need to spend money on. Why is Ina crying? I should really try Fallout 4. I've had it for years. Now we're in the void. We're in the sparkly void. Just you and I. I hope you enjoy the sparkly void. It's the first part of this I made. The song was the third? I mean, okay. He can. He just has to pay me at least $30. I'm sorry. I am not making a porn game. I'm making a cutesy, flirty game. That's why I always compare myself to Shantae, because Shantae just has the titties everywhere, but it's not like naughty R-rated titties, you see. It's just, ooh, titties, and that's all you get. So, not a porn game. I just didn't want to make a porn game. I'm sorry. I could add porn to it, but it's not the direction I'm inspired in on this one. I don't know what to tell you. I'm not saying no. I am saying every slime I add is more work I have to do, but I do want to do different skins eventually, which means I need to get over my whole hang up of not wanting to actually finish these fucking sprites I start, because they take so long. That's why there's still only one type of slime girl on the screen when there's supposed to be 3. I have thought about doing the real lazy route and just like putting costumes on these because it's easier. But we'll see. I do kind of want to, with the whole idea of the mushrooms and slimes fighting, eventually have a mushroom slime. Like a slime girl with like a mushroom growing out of her head like a hat or something, and she's just like symbiosis with the things. I think that'd be a cute way to wrap things up, kind of like, oh, no, we figured it out. Yeah, I don't know. Have her manage the randomized dungeons if I get that working, stuff like that. There's going to be one that's in armor, like a battle slime. That's going to be the slime that's most tied to the dungeons. That's one's the easiest level up by just playing dungeons, will be him, her, whatever. They're all girls. I don't know. I mean, I could do dude slimes, I guess. It's all reference to slime girls everywhere, and I like girls. I don't know. I could make the mushrooms boys and really mess it up. That'd make the mushroom slime mysteriously like agender, I guess, wouldn't it? Like, what are you? Oh, I'm not a shroom boy. I'm not a slime girl. What are you? I'm a me. Well, yeah. Yeah, I do want to have different different things. All different things. It's all art. Art and implementation. And as evidenced by how much of it is actually in the game at this point, it takes a lot. It's also not my first part. I mean, I got to focus on commissions and stuff. So this has very much been a backlog project for a very long time now. Probably more like 3 or 4 years. And I'm just starting like, hey, this was a cool idea as of a couple months ago. I was like, I like the dungeon thing. Let's do it. So, but yes, Lizzie, I said the C word. You're right. Commissions. But, you know, we got a little bit done here today. We got a little bit done on the puzzle mode. For coming in just to show it off, I think that's pretty good. But it is almost 10, and I do need to eat. We're going to go back to my favorite place. I think the next thing I'm going to add is collision checks in here, which is going to make it really annoying to walk around because a lot of the stuff just doesn't have a way forward. Oh, wow, I didn't see it. It's hard to spot there, but it is there. There we are. We're back in I'm going to go over there to that shore. I just like it over there. I just think it's neat. This is my favorite spot. This is where I like the vibe. I like the vibe by my log. My beautiful, probably way too high poly log compared to most like PlayStation era stuff that's like 6 sides and that's it. Yeah. So it's coming along. I'm worried about this not vibing with whatever I do for 2D art for the backgrounds. I could just like screenshot this for backgrounds if I'm a real lazy fucker or just use it to build backgrounds. I don't know, but I would prefer to draw them for the 2D stuff and have the 3D be like an outlier. So I'm trying to kind of capture that early era of like the PS1-ish sort of, you know, sprite style where things are, the 2D stuff is very refined and the 3D stuff is kind of rough. That's just what I wanted. I thought it would be a cute aesthetic. I could be wrong. I don't know. I could end up changing this dirt and tree texture again a third time. The water's probably staying because it's just a vertex color. But hey, we'll see. The dungeons are early. The dungeons are early and brainstormy, and I'm not even 100% committed to them, but I am about 99%. I love them. I love them conceptually. I like making the parts. It's okay. So it's going to be a lot of sprite work. So the enemies are the ones I showed earlier, the gummy worm and stuff. Slime forest, slime game. Dungeon monsters. Like this is enemy. This is an enemy. These are what you're fighting, right? When you're in combat, it's sprites. You will swat some bugs. Don't worry about it. Don't you worry none. And the predator prey thing is a recent idea before I drew, after I drew all 3 of these. So, I'm happy to have thought of it because it does explain the discrepancy in things trying to eat you and things that look very edible. But there are just loaded as an object, you stupid thing. The 3D things that walk around. These don't look right. Okay, you know what? No, that's fine. That's fine. Check this shit out, guys. Look what I can do. It's not in here. Where did I put it? Dungeon monster, dungeon monster, dungeon monster, dungeon monster. There he is. No, it's going to be these guys. These guys are what's going to walk around. Got the elite monster. Then we've got the boss. And I made these for the predator prey I did too. So, and that is very much inspired by Labyrinth of Refrain's handling of it. Being able to know which way the monsters are facing and track their movement is very important to the element of being able to move around them and use their movement to your advantage. which is a huge thing I want. So we're going to do that. Um, I need Dungeon Collision to work for one thing, if I can do it for the others, but it should be just checking the tile set, basically. Yeah. That's the gist. That's the gist of what I'm doing. There's a lot of little things. Maybe I'll finish this later. I don't know. Oh, yeah, Gularia for the story scene. I mean, we do have lots of, like, there's so much stuff I've done for this, dudes. You know, this is the placeholder at the whoops. This is like meant to be like, here's your portrait, here's where the bars for your HP and stuff go. I don't think I'm going to keep that. I think I'm changing that entirely to something a little more modern. But my dungeon originally was just showing up in this box here. And this was going to be your mini map. This is why if you see a lot of early screenshots of this, like from a month or two ago when I started building it, this is what I was doing. I was going for a very old school, like Ultima wizardry kind of look. And ultimately, I thought, you know, the resolution being like halved and stuff, and then tied to window size and whatnot, because I went for that low res look that matches the pixel art. It made it much harder to see what the hell you were looking at. And I was like, all right, you know what? We're gonna make this bigger. I think I'm gonna put the HP and stuff over here, almost like Persona style or something. I don't know. We'll see what I do with that. Like little heads, little icons for your people and their stats outside of battle, and then in battle it will change to different UI. Put the apex meter up here or over here, so maybe right under the. I don't know. I'll figure it out. I haven't played the UI much. UI is such an iterative thing. I'm amazed I settled as much as I did on the one in here. So this is mostly just native shit, and I just kept it. I think it does the job fine. Like, yeah, these get sub-pixely. They're, you know, but fuck it. There's a few things in the puzzle that get sub-pixely, and it's not my favorite thing to admit, but it's, you know, it's what it is. Yeah, I've got my stinking, I played around with making a background, and I get what I'm going for there, but I don't like how it looks. Then this shit, oh, the dithering. I did that. I'm like, this will take me 20,000 years, and I don't even think it looks like DOS more than anything, you know? I'm like, no. And then I did some tutorial reference stuff, and I did a couple of color tests, lighter and darker, and there's my dirt. There's my dirt. There's the original slime girl. Is it still here? No, I have to open it in A-Sprite. The original slime. This is the original placeholder slime. Ta-da! You like her? You like her, guys? Isn't she beautiful? She's beautiful. She's gorgeous. This was the original slime ball. No, it's just rough drafting it. Yep, and there's her. And there's my probably too high res, no AI thing. I work on the logo for the splash screens. Which right now it's just popped in there with a couple filters on it. And you can tell. Maybe. Maybe. Here's what that actually looks like when it's not being run through the engine. Their palettes are all fully customizable. That was the easiest customization I could think of, and that was in their day one. I wanted that. Merlin, hello. That was weird. There's the entire eyeball. This is the entire texture sheet for the monsters that run around. That's it. That's the whole thing. Scaling my sprites for the girls, different stages. Like, I got all kinds of stuff. Inspiration. I think there's this. Yeah, there's what the original. That's what the dungeons looked like about a month or two ago. So they've come a bit of a ways. And like, you just added the compass today. Yes, you are right. I did just add the compass today. What was I doing before? That was just a camera way above the player looking straight down at the map. That funneled through a viewport. So the player is a triangle walking around, and that just lets you see it. I decided I didn't like how that looked, and also that it was too hard to edit. And then I went from I don't like these textures to screw it, I'll just make 3D models to I mean the textures look more foresty, I don't know, and I'm like I can't decide on my life. Um, so a lot of the tile set implementations have me redoing things that are kind of done but very prototype. Make it more intentional and less hacking things together. Me when I figured out the rainbows. Loop, loop. What's this one do? Loop. Trying to find like one with the originals. I guess I don't have them. Yeah, there's how the grayscale works. I have lots of little things. There's that whole tile set. That's it. That's the tile set for the forest. Merlin. Hi. You are a cat. You are a cat. You come in at the end of this, my chitty chatty game Debbie stream, and you meow at me with needs. He's a good boy. Concept art. There's the original three girls. There's me drawing the popper initially. It's, it takes some steps. Oh, there's the original drawing of her. There you go. Glorp. And there's Gularia in her various stages. And this is part of why it's not a porn game. I don't want you to get attracted to the child looking form. I think that would be weird. So, you know, yes, you are a cat. Yes, you are a cat. Yes, meow, meow, meow. Yes, you are a cat. You are all on me. You want love, I see. Meow, 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 meow. Mommy, pet me. Pet me. Pet me. Yes, you're a good boy. Let me wrap up, son. Let me wrap her up, okay? I'm going to close some things. It's going to be lovely. I may or may not come back to this after I get. I don't have a lot of night left. We'll see. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and hop on over here. Welcome to the void. Cave. Look to my cave, which is also a Godot project. I think now is a good enough time to point out the cave is fully editable, and at some point I would like to make a more proper "it's a cave" than just some CSG stuff. But yes, sink into the void. If anyone like loves OtterCat and wants to doodle OtterCat, I will absolutely hang that on the wall behind me. Yes, welcome to my cave. It's fully editable. I wanted to put little trophies from whatever games we play and like finish or whatever on here. I don't know when the call Mega Bonk finished, but I might put a mallet behind me somewhere. Get like get one of those bunny plushies or something from Star Ocean. I don't know. We'll see. I want to decorate the cave at some point, which would probably help if it was actually a cave and not just a hollowed out circle with some cubes making a floor and a flat plane that's supposed to look like water and mostly just looks like I spilled oil on my blue slime ground. One thing at a time. So, but look at my pretty refracting lights. Aren't those pretty? Aren't those nice? Ooh, noise textures going wee. That's like my favorite thing water does. I love that shit. I love that shit. Oh, I should play the cave more. I love the cave. Yeah. So that is 3.5 hours of Slime Force. I gotta eat and I guess bake a cake. Thank you for joining me. If you have any ideas for the cave, let me know and I'll see what I can think up and do. Maybe that might be fun. And what is my plan? Tomorrow is probably more commissions because it's Saturday. Sunday should be animation if I don't burn myself out like a dumb idiot. Yep. And Monday is the bi-weekly report. So, oh, I think it's also the Terraria update. It's either Monday or Tuesday. I want to play Skyblock, so you might see me Monday on here. Otherwise, it's going to be Pixel for most of the weekend, so I'll see you there. Because I'm going to be drawing naughty stuff. I closed some stuff in my clip studio before I started just in case, so I didn't have a big old rigid peepus on here. I didn't want to get in trouble. Something, Paisery painting. Yeah. Someday I should make an otter that's not the Star Ocean otter, but I kind of like the outfit. So sorry, Miracle. I stole it. I stole your clothes. So the cat girl in Star Ocean is naked now. I stole her clothes, but she kept her weird little pants equivalent, her bikini bottom thing. She can have that. I don't want that. I'm not that much of a show my bulge person. Yes, it would have been a very bad alt tab. I even put it on the other window, and then I just closed Clip Studio outright. Like I was anxious about it. I did not want to mess it up. So I was mindful. I tried very hard not to be in trouble, and I was still in the emotes folder. I'm worried there might have been something in there that flashed for like a frame that's going to get me in deep shit. I don't know. Maybe I should go look. Maybe I should look at how scared I should be. Hey, how scared should I be? Let's look. Let's go into emotes. Yeah, technically I could get in trouble for that, I guess, if someone like squinted. Gonna be parsed through tiny or whatever. I may or may not have edited the grinning imp emoji, the purple one, to be giving someone a blowjob. Don't worry. I am a normal person. Normal person.